Welcome, everyone, to this briefing brought to you by the Israel Defense and Security Forum, IDSF. Thank you to everyone joining at our new time right now. Y'all changed the clocks in North America over the weekend, but we have not yet changed them over here. So until we change the clocks at the end of the month, it's now 11 a.m. Eastern Time. If you are on our mailing list, hopefully you received that notification. If you're not on that mailing list, this is a great opportunity to sign up for the IDSF emails so that you can get the latest and greatest about what we are doing over here in Israel. And of course, I'll put that link in the chat. It's a great pleasure to be joined today by the founder and chairman of IDSF, Brigadier General Amir Avivi, who is in his car right now driving to Judea and Samaria. And therefore, General, we thank you for focusing on the road, but at the same time providing us this briefing. It's good to see you.
Thank you very much, Moshe.
General, there's a lot going on. Why don't we just jump in and tell us what's the most relevant information for us to know right now about this war?
Well, something I would say really strange, happened this week. We saw suddenly the administration talking directly to Hamas. Never happened before. I must say that Israel is not happy about that. I think that Hamas perceives the U.S. talking directly to them as a sign of weakness. And we see that they are not agreeing to release hostages. We never know; it's hard to predict future. But I will be surprised if, following these talks, Hamas will be willing to release hostages. I would have expected the administration at this point to say to Qatar, to Egypt, to Turkey, you have a few days to hand over all the leadership of Hamas and straight to Guantanamo, and that's it. I mean, they killed dozens of Americans. They kidnapped Americans. America has the right and the ability to pressure Qatar, Egypt, and Turkey to hand over all the leadership and put them behind bars. This is the only thing I can think of that can really, really be a game changer and make Hamas feel that they need to find a solution and release the hostages. I don't think that talking to them and conducting these talks directly behind the back of Israel, this is the solution. Minister Dermer has expressed Israel's position on that, saying that if there are talks, Israel needs to handle them. And I think that it's time that President Trump realizes that there is so much you can do, talking or threatening. We need action. And action is attacking Iran. Action is arresting all the leadership of Hamas. Action is not negotiating with Hamas. And we'll see this coming days. We cannot have a reality where there is a ceasefire and hostages are not being released, and we are not putting any military pressure. Israel at the moment stopped electricity to Gaza, stopped humanitarian aid, but we have to be realistic. This is going to impact Gaza maybe in a few months. They have a lot of gasoline. They have a lot of humanitarian aid. Hamas is regrouping and preparing for confrontation with the IDF. Every day that passes, they are getting more ready to fight our soldiers, and this will obviously have a price. So I think that the coming days, week, maybe two, I don't know, it's hard to predict, will be very, very instrumental in seeing where this is going. And if they don't release hostages in the coming days, we must take a decision coordinated with the U.S. to open the gates of hell and attack fiercely Hamas. The new chief of staff, Eyal Zamir, has approved the war plans, has demanded People are saying hi to me from the road, as I'm driving. Um, People have so the chief of staff has approved all the war plans. He demanded a more decisive attack, more forces, a shorter time. So he's pushing the army towards a decisive attack, which we need to see when exactly it will happen. I visited yesterday the Gaza division all over the south. I had a chance to speak several times to the chief of staff, who is a good friend for the last 20 years. And it really seems that we have a chief of staff that wants to make really serious changes in the army, and really bring the simple understanding. There is one thing the army needs to do: win wars. That's it. This is why we have an army. They need to win the war. Um, so I'm hoping that the talks between the Israeli government and the administration will be fruitful, and we'll all understand that the time for talking is over. Now we need action on all fronts. And this is very important. I want to address also something else which is important to talk about, and this is the meeting between President Trump and Zelensky and everything that's going on regarding Ukraine, um, and try to explain why. Why is it that America is trying to get closer to the Russians at the expense of Ukraine? And I think there are several reasons we need to understand. Uh, I think the main reason is that the administration views China as the main challenge. China is the biggest enemy of America in America's eyes. And the most important thing for America is to dismantle the Chinese, Russian, Iranian front. The way to dismantle them, when we talk about Iran, is hit them and hit them hard. We need a decisive attack, 2 3 days American Israeli attack, and really take Iran out of the equation, hit the head of the snake, dismantle the Shia axis. This is one crucial issue we need to deal with. When we talk about Russia, the US wants to move Russia from Chinese hands to some kind of alliance with the US. The US is taking advantage from the fact that Russia is tired from the war, lost many, many soldiers. They would like to end this, but of course, they will be willing to end it only if everything they conquered stays in Russian hands. Russia managed to take pretty much everything it wanted from Ukraine. They talked from the beginning about the Donbas area in the east, about Crimea, and also about making sure that Ukraine will not be in NATO, and the US is willing to give Russia all of that. And we assure them that Ukraine won't be part of NATO. Donbas and Crimea will stay in Russian hands. So this is good enough for the Russians. And this can enable the US to move Russia from China. And then, if Russia is more on the American side, we'll see China surrounded by a US alliance with Russia, with India, South Korea, Japan, Philippines, possibly Indonesia, if they also sign the peace agreements with Israel. So this can be very, very meaningful for the US to be able to contain China. And talking about Israel, this is really something that can impact Israel also, because if the US stops investing huge amounts of munitions and money in Ukraine, obviously they can invest more in Israel. We had to send to Ukraine a lot of munitions at the beginning of the war. This impacted our ability to fight. Also, if the Russians, if they stop the war in Ukraine and they're able to concentrate more on Western Syria, where as we speak, there is ethnic cleansing. The Sunni radicals of Julani are butchering all the Alawis. I don't know if people got the chance to see videos. They look like the 7th of October. Same atrocities done by Julani forces. So if Russia wants to keep Latakia in the western part of Syria, this can help keeping the Turks at least. Russians have been and can be a stabilizing factor in Syria. So this is also something we can get out of it. And of course, if we manage to detach Russia from Iran, this is a very, very big deal. If there is one reason Iran felt strong enough to attack Israel on the 7th of October, is their alliance with the Russians. And we need to break this. And breaking this is dismantling the Chinese-Russian-Iranian front. Also, we need to understand that U.S. supported Ukraine extensively with a lot of money and munitions to such a degree that the U.S. remained without munitions. So if there is war now, this very moment, if there is war, U.S. is without munitions or without enough munitions. And this is very dangerous for U.S. Global deterrence and readiness for war. So because the Ukrainians didn't deliver, like Israel, they didn't manage to push the Russians at all back. So it seems like a dead end. And how much munitions and money you can continue sending if they don't manage to do the job? And on the contrary, the Russians are pushing more and more and putting more pressure. Russian economy is a war economy. For example, they are producing something like 4 million artillery shells. The US is producing around 1 million. So they're producing 1,200,000. So they're producing roughly 3 times more than the all of the US. But they're also getting 1 million artillery shells from North Korea. So they have 4 times more. And this is just talking about artillery. We can talk about many other components which the Russians are producing. So even if the US would give everything to Ukraine, and they won't, they cannot keep up with the pace in which Russia is building its army and its willingness to pay whatever price, talking about soldiers to achieve their goals of war. So obviously, there's a lot of pressure from the administration to really stop the war, move the Russians to Western hands, disconnect Russia from China and Iran, and in return, let Russia keep the areas they conquered in Ukraine. This is the strategy. If you want to understand what is happening, it's happening because of this kind of thinking. People can be supportive or not supportive of this strategy, but this is why it's done. Looking at it from an Israeli point of view, this benefits Israel. For Israel, it's good to have the Russians again more inclined to the West and not supporting China and certainly not supporting Iran. And we need also Russia to maybe change altogether its position in the UN Council and the way they look at Gaza. So it's up to President Trump to make sure that if he gives Russia this win, he makes sure that he gets everything it wants to get from Russia in return. And this is a big challenge of the administration. Israel is following very closely the atrocities in Syria. Anybody who thinks that this regime in Syria is something we can accept, I'm saying it crystal clear. These are ISIS on steroids. This is not the kind of guys you do business with. And therefore, we are really making sure that nobody with weapons can go south of Damascus to the area of the Golan, the Syrian Golan. any force that tries to move south is met with the IDF, an IDF retaliating and attacking. And in the reality we have now in the north of Israel, if I take a snapshot, because it's very hard to predict in the long future what will happen, but if I look at the north of Israel now, this very moment, we haven't had a better security situation in the last 40 years. It's the best situation we had in the last 40 years. But it's dynamic. We have to really follow. We keep attacking also Hezbollah and making sure they don't rebuild themselves. And this can deteriorate. They might try to challenge us again, but we're keeping them weak. And as we are speaking, there is also fighting between Shias and Sunnis inside Lebanon, in Tripoli, and in other places. So this civil war in Syria is extending into Lebanon. And this is a very interesting phenomena we are seeing now in the north. As things are evolving in Gaza and in the north, Israel is preparing also for the challenge with Iran, preparing for an attack. We want to see this with the US. We want to see the US leading this effort. And President Trump has sent a message to Iran: you should dismantle your sites. He's trying to negotiate that, but with a clear message that this is not going to be a long negotiation. It's either they do something or they might be attacked. And I really think that it's time the US really pushes a policy on the ground. The US needs to stand strong somewhere. The right place to do it is Iran. We need the US to attack militarily Iran. There are moments where talking won't cut it. It's time to show strength, and this will enable the US to push other policies in other places. Because if there is going to be only talking, there will be a moment where other countries will disregard it and not take it seriously. And this is a very clear message we in IDSF are sending to the US. I will be in the White House next week and have a chance to have some of these discussions and really explain what's going on the ground here in Israel. Moshe?
General, thank you so much for that very comprehensive overview. If I could ask a follow-up question in terms of what's happening with Ukraine and Russia, that there seems to be a trend that when the U.S. withdraws its support, bad things can happen, whether it was Lebanon in the 80s or Iraq or Afghanistan. Is there a concern that, you've presented a strong explanation for why there's value to pulling Russia out of that axis with Iran and China, but is there an equal concern that the U.S. pulling support from the Ukraine sends a message that just wait long enough and the U.S. will pull back, as we saw with the growth of Hezbollah in Lebanon, or what's happening in Afghanistan? Could somehow that message of U.S. pulling from Ukraine have bad implications?
I think it teaches us one very clear lesson, which we in IDSF understand. It's all about real interests. If the US has real interest to support you, it will support. If they don't, they won't. I mean, it's just as simple as that. This is why Israel must take advantage of this period of time and build its capabilities in a way that we can defend ourselves by ourselves. We cannot be 100% completely independent, but we definitely can push it to a place where, if for some reason the US doesn't support, we are strong enough to defend ourselves and do the job. In times where you have big support, You have to develop your industries. You have to also make sure that you have huge stockpiles of everything you need. It's like, I'm thinking back in the Bible when, in Egypt, before the hunger, they had stockpiles for 7 years, right? And then when the hunger came, they could feed for the next 7 years. So I think that we have to really make sure that when we have the chance, we have to build ourselves in a way that takes in account that things change. We don't know what will happen in 4 years. I have no idea. What will be the global arena? What will happen? What will be the interest? So we really need to make sure that we build things the right way. Um, and also, work on a relationship that is based on real interest. It's the only thing that can make sure that no matter what administration there is, if it's met with real interest, there will be a good relationship. And at least at present, I can say that the US needs Israel not less than Israel needs the US. It's the only stable country, the only democratic country, the strongest country in the Middle East. It's the key to build an alliance between the West and the Sunni world. We are the key. We are also crucial for the ability of the US to compete with the East, talking about cutting edge technologies like hypersonic missiles, AI, quantum computing. Um, Israel is crucial for the ability of the US to be relevant technologically. So we have a lot to offer. It's not a one-sided relationship like with Ukraine. We are bringing huge value. Every dollar the US invests in Israel, they get a return of $10. It's the best stock in the world.
Thank you, General. Are you able to comment a little bit about Ramadan and how it's impacting this war in Gaza? Has Hamas secured another ceasefire by default because it's Ramadan? And also, you're headed to Judea and Samaria. Is there any expectation over Ramadan things will heat up there?
Ramadan is always a very sensitive time, and we have to be very alert about Judea and Samaria and what might happen there. Um, on the other hand, we might see in the coming weeks Israel going into a full-scale war while Ramadan is on, as it happened last year. Last year we were in war, and there was Ramadan. It didn't change anything. Hamas cannot threaten us as they did before, shooting tens of thousands of rockets. Maybe they're doing some level of buildup, but it's nothing compared to what they were able to do before. So really, it's mostly about seeing what's going on in Judea and Samaria, limiting the amount of Arabs that can go into Temple Mount so they don't riot and there's not a mess, limiting the age as we did in previous years. And if we are alert and ready, there's no reason why we cannot control and make sure that things are under control.
Thank you. I think we have time for one more question. I think everyone watching this, sending in your questions. If you're watching on YouTube, putting your questions down below or sending us an email really helps us guide these conversations. General, there's a lot of talk right now, again, in the news about the growing anti-Semitism in the US and around the world. Are you able to comment on how that has a direct effect on what is happening here in Israel?
Well, first and foremost, Israel has a responsibility not just to defend the state of Israel and the Israelis. Israel has the responsibility to defend all Jews, wherever they are. Every one of us, every soldier in the IDF, we are willing to give our lives for any Jew anywhere. And I think that after this war, Now Israel is very, very focused on this multi-front war and winning it. But I believe that one of the biggest challenges Israel will have to deal with after this war is the growing anti-Semitism. It's not going to stop. I always mention how optimistic I am about the future of Israel and how things will look after the war. I think it's going to be a golden age. But as optimistic as I am about Israel, I'm pessimistic about anti-Semitism. I think that it's just going to grow and grow exponentially. And we have to prepare for, on one hand, defending the Jewish communities with every capability we have, but also preparing Israel for massive aliyah of Jews in the coming years and decade. I can see millions coming to Israel, and we have to be ready. We have to secure Israel in a way that really will be a safe haven for every Jew. Um, so there are big challenges ahead of us, and the Jewish people must unite. We must go back to our core values of Judaism, of Zionism, of connection to our story, to our land, to our people, to our heritage, to the Bible. This is the only thing that will strengthen us. You cannot appease anti-Semites by turning your back on who you are, on your identity. This is not going to work. We want to deal with this. We need to be strong, staunch Jews and Zionists, and deal with this from a place of strength and resolution and not weakness. Weakness doesn't work on Hamas, and weakness won't work on anti-Semites. We have to stand strong. So a lot of challenges ahead, but we've been around almost 4,000 years. We'll outlast these anti-Semites, and we'll continue to thrive.
For sure. Brigadier General Amir Avivi, thank you so much for sharing all of that. Thank you to all of our viewers and supporters for tuning into this briefing. And you heard it straight from the General. Everyone has a charge. If you're joining us from North America to make Aliyah, come over on this side of the Atlantic. Life here in Israel is good. You're contributing to the establishment of the modern state of Israel. What could be more valuable? So thank you for tuning in. Thank you for those of you who noted the time change and came accordingly. We'll be back with you tomorrow, 11 a.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. here in Israel. Until then, stay safe, stay strong. Take care, everyone.